Okay, now today is actually Valentine's Day. I am recording this on right around noon on February 14th, 2022. If I had been on top of my game, if I had been capable of planning this and executing this plan to a high degree of competence and efficiency, I'd be reading the Song of Solomon today. That seems like it would be fitting for this particular day now, wouldn't it? I am not ready to do that. I am going to be reading these books in the order in which they are presented in the Bible itself: Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon. I thought about switching it around and doing Song of Solomon second. I try to envision like which of these Solomon might have written first. I think Ecclesiastes pretty obviously was written last. It seems to have been written at the end of Solomon's life. So that, in that sense, it makes sense to read Ecclesiastes last. I can't tell really which came first, Proverbs or Song of Solomon. Song of Solomon probably, assuming that Song of Solomon is autobiographical, which I'm not convinced of. It may have been, it may not have been, I don't know. Solomon is a character in the Song of Solomon, but I'm not convinced the Song of Solomon is actually meant to be autobiographical, reflecting his actual life experiences. I just don't know. Assuming that it was, it might have been written early, or at least the content of it came from an early period of his life, because it seems to be talking about the first woman he ever fell in love with, and he fell in love with a lot of them. But I don't know. There really honestly just is not any way to parse through that. So in the end, I decided to just read the books straight up in the order in which they're compiled in our English Bibles. They're not written, the books of the Bible are not arranged this way in the original Hebrew, and that's, So I'm just going to read them in the order in which they are written here, in which they are published here in these books that we've got. Which means I'm not going to be getting into the Song of Solomon today, even though it would be thematically fitting for this particular day. I'm going to be reading Proverbs first. Now, Proverbs has a structure to it that is interesting. Proverbs is 31 chapters long, of course, according to our numbering system. The chapters and verses weren't part of the original text, of course. It's basically broken up into a few different parts. The first 9 chapters, as we have numbered them, are set up. The Proverbs themselves start in chapter 10. We're not even going to get to that today. The Proverbs themselves start in chapter 10 and go on through chapter 29. And the first 9 chapters are all kind of a setup, or we're laying the groundwork or setting the stage for the Proverbs that occur in chapters 10 to 29. The premise of this book, as it is written, is that somebody, Solomon, the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, is speaking to someone. He identifies this person as son or sons. I'm not clear if this is his actual son or if he's just referring to whoever happens to be listening to him. But he's speaking to somebody that he wants to give instruction to, which again could be his actual biology. His son in the narrative, the one who becomes king after him, is Rehoboam. Rehoboam, as we find out, was not a good king, didn't do any of the stuff that Solomon recommended that he do. So I'm not sure if this son is supposed to be Rehoboam or if it's just anybody. Solomon would have obviously had other sons because he had 1,000 wives. So he would have had plenty of sons. And I don't know if he's actually talking to his biological sons or if he is simply referring to whoever happens to be hearing his instruction. He's just imparting wisdom on whoever happens to be listening. I'm not sure. But the beginning of the book is going to be him talking to this son, to this hypothetical person listening to him, about, and his argument is going to be that you're going to be faced with a choice in life. He's talking to a young person. I mean, in the end, Proverbs is kind of written with the premise that the person being spoken to is young and hasn't made a decision in life yet. He's saying that you're going to have a decision in life to make. You have 2 paths to go down. You can go down the right path or you can go down the wrong path. And which is pretty much the decision that Adam and Eve had in the garden. You can eat of this tree or you can eat of that tree. If you eat of the one tree, you'll be given life. If you eat of the other tree, you'll be condemned to death. And that's essentially the same choice that Solomon is offering his son or sons or listeners here. There's a right path and there's a wrong path. There is a path that leads to life and there's a path that leads to death. There's a path that is personified by wisdom and there is a path that's personified by folly. And you can choose which of these 2 forces you listen to. You can choose which of these 2 paths you go down. That is the premise of, and he is instructing his son to follow the path of wisdom. and that is the premise of the book of Proverbs. Wisdom itself will be characterized in the form of a person. We're going to be calling this character Lady Wisdom, and Lady Wisdom has a contrast to we'll call Lady Folly. So you choose the right path, you go down the path of wisdom, you're choosing to hear the instruction and listen to the advice and live in the house of Lady Wisdom. And if you choose the wrong path and go down the path of folly, you're choosing to listen to the advice of and listen and live in the house of folly. Lady Wisdom will ultimately be personified in the form of a character at the end of the book. This famous Proverbs 31 woman that we hear so much about, maybe not so much in men's circles, but still we're aware of it, is actually a personification of Lady Wisdom, as she's going to be presented to us here at the beginning of the book. So here we go. Proverbs, starting in chapter 1, verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. For attaining wisdom and discipline, for understanding words of insight, for acquiring a disciplined and prudent life, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. Let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and the riddles of the wise. We read in the narrative of King Solomon that he came up with 3,000 proverbs. I don't think there's 3,000 proverbs in the book of Proverbs, but there's a lot. So we're going to get a good sample of his 3,000 here. And he was interested in knowing how to judge and knowing how to discern. That was what he talked about with God back when he was a young man. I don't think he ever really lost that. I think that in the end, as his life went on, his wisdom got corrupted. But I don't think he ever really lost the desire to have wisdom and know how to discern properly what to do. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Now, the father is the one speaking, of course. But the mother is included in here. He is going to mention the mother as well a few times. So there is a duality here. Both the father and the mother are important to instruct the son, although the father is the one whose words are actually recorded here for us. Although at the end of the book we get the words from the mother. That famous Proverbs 31 section is actually spoken by Lemuel according to the teaching he got from his mother. So the entire Bible was written by men too, man. That's just how it is. So the father is the one who's actually speaking here, but the mother is important in the instruction too. Listen, my son, to your father's instruction, and do not forsake your mother's teaching. They will be a garland to grace your head and a chain to adorn your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not give in to them. If they say, come along with us, let's lie in wait for someone's blood. Let's waylay some harmless soul. Let's swallow them alive like the grave, and whole like those who go down to the pit. Those are terms for the underworld, land of the dead, jail. So they're going to kill someone. They're plotting to kill someone here. We will get all sorts of valuable things. They're plotting to kill and murder and pillage someone. They're going to kill someone and steal his stuff and fill our houses with plunder. Throw in your lot with us, and we will share a common purse. So this is a band of outlaws. This is a band of murderers and thieves and robbers. My son, do not go along with them. Do not set foot on their paths. For their feet rush into sin. They are swift to shed blood. How useless to spread a net in full view of all the birds. These men lie in wait for their own blood. They waylay only themselves. Such is the end of all who go after ill-gotten gain. It takes away the lives of those who get it. Wisdom calls aloud in the street. She, wisdom again is personified as a woman in this book. She raises her voice in the public squares. At the head of the noisy streets, she cries out in the gateways of the city, so the most important places of the city in that day and time. She makes her speech. And here it is. How long will you simple ones? Now, simple in this, this simple one is referring to is someone who hasn't made a decision yet. Someone who has not committed to a path one way or another yet. How long will you simple ones love your simple ways? How long will mockers delight in mockery? And fools, and those are the ones who are choosing to be morally deficient, hate knowledge. If you had responded to my rebuke, this is wisdom speaking here again, I would have poured out my heart to you, and made my thoughts known to you. But since you rejected me when I called, and no one gave heed when I stretched out my hand, and since you ignored all my advice and would not accept my rebuke, I, in turn, will laugh at your disaster. I will mock when calamity overtakes you. When calamity overtakes you like a storm, when disaster sweeps over you like a whirlwind, when distress and trouble overwhelm you. They had their chance. They had the opportunity to learn from wisdom, so that when the trouble overtook them, they wouldn't be swept away. They didn't take that chance. Then they will call to me, but I will not answer. They will look for me, but they will not find me. Since they hated knowledge and did not choose to fear the Lord, since they would not accept my advice and spurn my rebuke, they will eat the fruit of their ways and be filled with the fruit of their schemes. They're going to get what's coming to them. For the waywardness of the simple will kill them, and the complacency of fools will destroy them. Whoever listens to me will live in safety and be at ease without fear of harm. Now the Father is speaking again. My son, if you accept my words and store up my commands within you, turning your ear to wisdom and applying your heart to understanding, and the heart was where they thought your thinking power was. We would today call this the brain, the mind. And if you call out for insight and cry aloud for understanding, and if you look for it as for silver and search for it as for hidden treasure, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, and from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He holds victory in store for the upright. He is a shield to those whose walk is blameless. For he guards the course of the just and protects the way of his faithful ones. Then you will understand what is right and just and fair, every good path. For wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Wisdom will save you from the ways of wicked men, from men whose words are perverse, who leave the straight paths to walk in dark ways, who delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil, whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. It will save you also from the adulteress, from the wayward wife with her seductive words, who has left the partner of her youth and ignored the covenant she made before God. For her house leads down to death, and her paths to the spirits of the dead. None who go to her return, or attain the paths of life. He's referring here not just to an adulterous woman. Certainly there could be a literal application here in terms of don't engage in adultery with a married woman or something along those lines. But he's referring more broadly to the concept of don't choose the wrong path. I mentioned that there are going to be two ladies here, female figures portrayed. Lady Wisdom, which we read about a moment ago, and here's Lady Folly being introduced. Here's the wrong choice. This is the path that leads down the wrong to the wrong destination. Both of these options are personified as women, Lady Wisdom and Lady Folly. So we're not talking literally necessarily about an actual physical adulteress luring. Yeah, that could happen. Okay, there could be some literal application here to that, but we're really speaking more broadly to, don't choose the wrong path. Don't follow Lady Folly down into sin. My son, wait, I've skipped a few verses. Thus you will walk in the ways of good men, and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will live in the land, and the blameless will remain in it, but the wicked will be cut off from the land. Remember, the punishment for sin, ultimate punishment for sin to Israel, was being cut off from the land, and the unfaithful will be torn from it. My son, do not forget my teaching, but keep my commands in your heart, for they will prolong your life many years and bring you prosperity. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and men. It's not always this easy, as we read about when we read the book of Job. The thing about these Proverbs and all the teachings contained in here, and Ecclesiastes will kind of acknowledge this when we get to Ecclesiastes, is that even if you do follow these instructions, even if you do hold the wisdom like Job did, you can still find yourself in dire straits. You're not necessarily protected from harm or from bad circumstances just because you follow wisdom. It seems like you should be. And for the most part, yeah, and these principles do prove to be true the majority of the time. God set up the world in such a way that those who live this way will be rewarded in this life. But it doesn't always hold to be that way. And again, we read about that in Job. So don't take these proverbs or these conditions of life to be too literal, because they don't always work out the way that they should. Let love and faithfulness never leave you. Bind them around your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart. Then you will win favor and a good name in the sight of God and men. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge, that's a famous verse right there. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Or he will direct your paths, according to my footnote down there. Do not be wise in your own eyes. We read about that in the book of Judges, everyone doing what was right in his own eyes. Don't want to do that. Don't trust yourself to direct your own steps or make your own path straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, and do not resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves. As a father, the son he delights in. Blessed is the man who finds wisdom, the man who gains understanding. For she, again, wisdom personified as a she here, for she is more profitable than silver, and yields better returns than gold. Now Solomon liked his silver and gold. We read about that as we read about the account of his life in Kings and Chronicles. He made gold so abundant that silver was rendered worthless in the kingdom. So he liked his silver and gold. But here he's saying that wisdom is more profitable and yields better returns. She is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare it with her. Long life is in her right hand, and in her left are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. Remember the tree of life? Way back in the garden, God planted two trees in the middle of the garden. One of them was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and one of them was the tree of life. Genesis 2, verse 9. And the Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eye and good for food. In the middle of the garden were the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In verse 17, starting in verse 16, he said, he told the man, you are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. When you eat of it, you will surely die. Now, he doesn't tell them specifically to eat of the tree of life. He tells them what tree not to eat from, and it says you can eat from any other tree, including the tree of life. but they don't end up eating from that tree. After the sin, after the fall, he says this. God says this in verse 22. The man has now become like one of us, knowing good and evil. He must not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and live forever. And he said in verse 24, he drove the man out of the garden and placed on the east side of the garden cherubim and a flaming sword, flashing back and forth to guard the way to the tree of life. So mankind was barred after the fall, not before the fall. Man was permitted to and welcome to eat of the tree of life before the fall. After it, he could not. His way back to the tree of life was blocked and barred. But here, we're comparing wisdom to a tree of life. Mankind in the present, that was the past, that was the garden, that was back in the days of the beginning. Now in the present, in the current garden, we can still eat of the tree of life if we partake in Lady Wisdom. If we chase after wisdom and choose to live with wisdom, we can eat of the tree of life again, even in this day. She is a tree of life to those who embrace her. Those who lay hold of her will be blessed. It doesn't give us life forever. This tree does not. The tree of life will be in the garden to come, in the city to come at the end of the revelation, at the end of the story. This particular tree of life is not enough to give us physical eternal life. But we can still eat of this tree. In this case, it refers to taking hold of Lady Wisdom. By wisdom, the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding, this goes back again to the beginning imagery. So we're once again flashing back to the beginning of the story. There's a lot of that here in the works of Solomon. A lot of the works of Solomon are rooted in the early chapters of Genesis, the early part of the narrative. Because again, remember, we're halfway through the story, and Israel now is as prosperous as it will ever be, and they're coming as close as they, or probably anyone, will ever come to living life in the garden of delight again. So there's a lot of callbacks to the garden in the works of Solomon. By wisdom, the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding, he set the heavens in place. By his knowledge, the deeps were divided, and the clouds let drop the dew. My son, preserve sound judgment and discernment. Do not let them out of your sight. They will be life for you, an ornament to grace your neck. Then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. And when you lie down, you will not be afraid. Ever go to bed at night wondering what's going to come? Thinking about what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the day after that? Anxious when you go to bed? I know what that's like. I'm sure we all do. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Have no fear of sudden disaster, or of the ruin that overtakes the wicked. For the Lord will be your confidence, and will keep your foot from being snared. Do not withhold good from those who deserve it, when it is in your power to act. Do not say to your neighbor, come back later, I'll give it to you tomorrow, when you have it with you now. Do not plot harm against your neighbor, who lives trustfully near you. Do not accuse a man for no reason, when he has done you no harm. That's false testimony. These are all derived from the 10 words, or the 10 commandments, back in Exodus. All of the prohibitions and commands ultimately derive from there. Do not envy a violent man, or choose any of his ways, for the Lord detests a perverse man, but takes the upright into his countenance. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the home of the righteous. He mocks proud mockers, but gives grace to the humble. The wise inherit honor, but fools he holds up to shame.